Let's talk about death. Why, I think it's John Hopkins who originally started looking at that, giving psilocybin to their terminally ill cancer patients. What, there's a lot, I mean, we could spend a whole episode talking about death, how these drugs allow someone to decrease anxiety and accept their own death. I mean, we could talk about all the human decisions we make today based on our own fear of our own death.
Yeah, death, big issue.
Yeah. It's a great book called The Denial of Death that says,
right.
Everything we construct around us is to just kind of deny that
Hold
it's
it
there.
off. That's right.
What's your read on what you've seen so far that's happening now?
So that's really what got me interested. It was hearing about that trial, which sounded initially so implausible. I mean, here they were giving people with many of them with terminal cancer diagnosis. They all had cancer diagnosis. Originally, it was all going to be terminal, but they were having trouble recruiting, so they opened up people with serious diagnoses that might survive. And they were giving them a guided psilocybin trip. And that seems so counterintuitive to me. I can't imagine if I had a terminal diagnosis, the first thing I would want to do is have a trip that would take me to these very dark places, force me to confront what was going on. But in fact, a great many people who suffer from what the doctors call existential distress, which is their term for the combination of depression, anxiety, and fear that accompanies contemplation of your imminent death, we're looking for relief and willing to try this. And so I interviewed a lot of these people, and their stories were remarkable. Just to give you an example, I interviewed this one woman, her name is Dinah Baser, and she's 60-ish, no psychedelic experience, had been figure skating, is still, I guess, a figure skating instructor in Manhattan. And she had ovarian cancer and had been treated for it and was in remission, but nevertheless was terrified of recurrence and debilitated, paralyzed by it. She couldn't do anything. She just thought the next day the other shoe would drop. And she heard about this trial at NYU, New York University, and had a guided psilocybin trip. And what happened was, and this happens in a lot of the cancer patients, the experience is kind of this imaginative, intrapsychic movie. And in her case, it took her inside her body. And in many cases, people go in and see their cancer, confront their cancer. Right. And she, what she saw, though, was a black mass under her rib cage. So it wasn't her cancer, it was something else. And she recognized immediately what it was. It was her fear. And when she saw it, she screams out. Now remember, she's got two guides there. They don't know what's going on in her head. And she screams, "Get the fuck out of my body." And it evaporates, just like that. And afterwards, and I wrote about her, and I said, after her experience, her fear of recurrence was substantially diminished. This is in the New Yorker piece. And the New Yorker fact checkers called her and read her the line and said, "Is this true?" And she said, "No, that's not true. He got it wrong. The fear was eliminated, completely eliminated." And she also told me something that I found so perplexing, which was that she told me she was an atheist, but nevertheless, during the experience, she felt as though she'd been bathed in God's love. And I said, "Are you still an atheist?" She says, "Yes." I said, "So why are you using this God language?" She says, "Because we don't have a word big enough for what I felt. That's the biggest word we have." I thought that was quite beautiful. So I talked to a series of people like that, and those conversations to me were very meaningful, in part because my dad at the time had gotten a terminal diagnosis for lung cancer. And he was going through his own process, which was very internal, and he really didn't want to talk about it. And I sort of needed to talk about it because I was dealing with it. And so the fact that I didn't realize this till after the book even was done, that was kind of the personal subtext of the book, was thinking about death and talking to people who could talk openly about death and what they imagined it to be like. And they were working on it through their psilocybin journeys and their work with their therapist before and after. And my dad was processing it in a very different, very internal way. So a friend read the book after it was done and surprised me by saying, "Oh, wow, your father's on every page." And it wasn't until then that I realized, oh, that's why I was so interested in this. That's why I had to know what these people were dealing with.
It's dedicated to your father.
It is dedicated.
And I wonder why, and now I know why.
Yeah, no, that is why. He was grappling with these issues, and I to this day, and he passed in January. I don't know exactly how he processed it. And it was a generational thing. He wasn't going to talk about it.